Mm. I had earlier tried to do this, and then it was interrupted very quickly into it. And I was reminded of why I like Patreon so much, and why if I had met the goal I put on there, we wouldn't have such interruptions. But whatever, people are not going to sign up for it. It is what it is. So going back to what I was saying, I was trying to make the case for why I believe that the Democrats actually would prefer Trump gets another term than Sanders gets one, or at least as their nominee. And whether or not he loses is based on the actual people voting for him or not. Um, and I was mentioning how there were early warning signs, like Trump endorsing Pelosi for Speaker. Has been, do you think? Let me see. No, no, I'm saying, Marco, anything is possible. I'm just trying to explain why we can't even get the public's, just being able to give us the option of, whether you want one or the other, because the DNC and its antics will purposefully screw them over in the primary. But again, I'm trying to make my case. So one of the early warning signs was that after the Democrats took the House of Representatives, Trump endorsed Pelosi for Speaker. And in a just perfect world, this would have destroyed her chances of retaining that position. She had previously held it 8 years ago when the Republicans took the House in a massive sweep of over 60 seats. But I had said Trump wanted her for that position because with her 29% approval rating, she was more unpopular than he had ever been at any point in his tenure. So it made sense from a strategic, tactical standpoint to have a person who is unpopular compared to yourself as the face of the opposition party, the quote unquote opposition party. Um, and I've tried to explain to people, when you look at Pelosi's positions, Schumer's positions, Durbin's positions, Hoyer's positions, these are the first and second ranking Democrats in both chambers of Congress. They are identical in multiple areas. You can look to the past of Schumer, Pelosi, and the rest of these people and see, hawkish stances on immigration that really do match Trump's rhetoric. As I've said before, we're currently bombing 7 countries. To Trump's credit, he hasn't started any of those wars. But to the detriment of all of these Democrats I've mentioned, none of them have opposed getting out of these wars either before Trump took office, or rather have supported getting out of these wars, my mistake, before he took office or since he's been in office. When Trump pulled out of Syria, which I oftentimes bring up as an example of him doing something that I aligned more with him on than the Democrats, they were attacking him from the right. They were going, "We need to stay over there." You had the second ranking Democrat in the House starting to sound like Lindsey Graham. I couldn't tell who I was listening to. But when you match that up with Sanders and, in his past criticizing the different conflicts we've been involved with, it makes sense that they would prefer someone who aligns with them as far as keeping this continuous status quo of bombing going on. Secondly, and we oftentimes talk about donors and money and the corruption that is commonplace thanks to Citizens United, basically saying that bribery is freedom of speech, that cash counts as you being able to espouse your position on something. A lot of Sanders' positions are detrimental to a lot of the donors of the Democrats. The ones, for example, who have signed on to his single payer bill, for example, many of them have only signed, and this is, people like Harris, Booker, individuals that if you look through their public careers have never, ever talked about wanting a single payer healthcare system, have signed on to it so that they can run for president along, at the same time as he is, and appear to be enough like him that they might chip away some support that he previously had. And then when they get in office, keep the status quo going. This is, really indicative of kind of what I was saying before, that the Democrats, the ones that, had higher ambitions, they all took a back seat to Hillary. They said, okay, we're going to just sit here. We're going to shut up. We're not going to try to do anything. And, a lot of them are just careerists. But when they saw Sanders do as well as he did, and then remain a, the most popular politician currently that's active, or rather that is active. I should, I sound a little redundant there. They realized, hey, if I try to run to the right of him with my, we need to expand the ACA and stay in these wars, I'm going to get smashed. Because people will see that as the same old, same old. So let me try to pretend to be like him and hope that this sticks and I can, make my own thing go higher than his. But, this is why what I was saying is the reason we're getting into this. If you look at the opposition to Trump in a lot of instances, it's really manufactured and it's not directly going after it. So for example, um, you go over to the wars, as I mentioned before, they're not really being, you don't have Pelosi saying, oh, we need to get out of Afghanistan after 18 years, or Schumer saying that, or any of the Democrats who, for the most part, could be considered leadership or in some position of power, um, due to their being bought out by defense contractors. So in foreign policy, it is convenient to them to have Trump stay in office. And look, Trump himself is someone who is in the middle, because he was quoted as asking during one of his meetings, "Why can't we just pull out of Afghanistan?" And then, his whole team of neocons like John Bolton and Mike Pompeo teamed up on him. So he ended up kind of just saying, "All right, well, that's a bigger headache than anything else." Um, but that's to say that he is, in some cases, more in the middle than the Democrats are, the quote unquote moderate Democrats, which I don't even think exist anymore. You're either right wing or you're, actually progressive. But, there are a lot of pseudo progressives who purposefully are going to run against him with this idea in their head that they can use enough of his stuff and give kind of, little itty bitty committings, or they can commit to it a little bit and then pivot away from it in the general. Even has his issues like everyone else, but I'm more in favor of third party versus having a Democrat. Okay, well, I don't know what to tell you. And look, you know, I have stated before, I have problems with Sanders on a couple of things like BDS. I think that Israel's government will only because they don't, care about people saying, I condemn you for what you've done to the Palestinians. They will only care when they start facing economic backlash from people in positions of power, whether that's a business owner or another country. And, people, I've had one person say, well, Sanders is Jewish, so, he can't, you expect him to go against his own place. I think the only way that the Israeli government is going to have opposition that is not smeared as anti-Semitic simply because it disagrees with its treatment of Palestinians, is through having notable Jewish public figures like senators or governors or actors, anyone that has a bully pulpit in the sense of being a figure of notoriety, but also happening to be Jewish, so they can't be called anti-Semitic. They can't be called being opposed to themselves. Come out and say, yeah, we need to, have a fair and balanced system when it comes to these two feuding groups, or sides rather, and one has much more power than the other. So that's one of my principal problems with him. But again, I still would rather he not support it than have the position of Booker, who, for example, who was in favor of actually boycotting free speech by having a U.S. boycott of businesses that boycotted Israel, a boycott of a boycott by the U.S. government. I thought that was crazy, and people still pretend, that all these issues are intermixed. So really, what's all the more scary is that we have because I think I've mentioned before, Sanders has over an 80% approval rating with Democratic voters, but there's a sizable group who oppose him on social media, the never Bernie people. I like to sometimes read their messages, get a glimpse of what they're saying. And every time I look, I swear, in the dozens and dozens and hundreds of messages I've seen, I only ever noticed one that disqualified several of his positions. And to the person's credit, they actually were able to list the fact that people like Harris and Booker were trying to act like him. And that's why when I watch, the Never Bernie people say, "Oh, I like Harris, I like Booker, I like Castro, Julian or Julian or however you pronounce his name." They're they're disingenuous because they're purposefully ignoring the fact that these politicians who are careerists have tried to get his positions as a way of, again, synchronizing his support into their own, even though it fails because a good chunk of his voters know, where were you 2 years ago when these issues were being called pie in the sky fairy tale dreams that could never happen? They were nowhere to be seen. Um, but you go over to the other topics. So, single payer, for example, which I've mentioned my support for before other countries have it. You know, it's something that I back. But Democrats in office, for the most part, especially in the Senate, do not, because they have the pharmaceutical companies, itching at their heels, saying, "Hey, look, you can't destroy the private sector where we purposefully price gouge people and let big pharma determine if you're going to pay for your drugs or not pay your rent that month." We can't have someone just saying, "Oh, let's have the entire thing, be run by the government and no one can and that's kind of I don't want to get into any of those little ideological rants, but that's always been a problem when you don't have regulations on businesses. People who are in powerful positions get money hungry and then decide to transform it and corrupt it in whatever way they can squeeze out a couple of more coins. That's why Bezos wouldn't pay his workers an actual minimum wage, and kept hiring part time so we could get away and skirt by and not have to worry about those extra dollars slipping away from them. All of this stuff is tied together. Um, and really, when we talk about our discomfort with the Democrats, the actual voters, who are the people who have the most power, because if they voted all these people out of office, that'd be it. They will go on social media. They'll come to a channel like this. They'll go on Twitter. They'll go on Facebook, Instagram, and they will tell you, if you don't support whoever the Democrat is, you must really want Trump. But the problem is the Democrats themselves must really want Trump, since they're going out of their way to slander the people who, for the most part, have polling to support whatever positions they have. So, for example, whether I agree with Sanders on everything or not, which I don't, I would be foolish to ignore the fact that he polls as the most popular politician, that only he and Biden polled as winning, I believe it was Iowa and North Carolina. These are things that should be taken into account and should not be used to discredit individuals that we ourselves aren't particular fans of. I would say the same thing about Harris or Booker if they were at the top. It's just that simple. But objectivity is disappearing as we've evolved into this ultra feminist society of getting your emotions in the way of actual facts and things that are logical. So, for example, you still have Hillary supporters screaming to the heavens, and this is how hypocritical these people are. They will tell you that Sanders is the reason Hillary lost, even though, the articles are still there. He campaigned for, vigorously told his supporters not to vote for a third party. They will tell you that he's the reason why, his supporters are the reason why, even though only less than half of them, how do I explain this? 12% of them voted for Trump. A quarter of Hillary supporters voted for McCain in 2008. So that, even not even half of what Hillary had, traded on the Democrats. But that's besides the point. These same people who are saying that by not voting for the Democrat, you're the reason we got Trump, are the same ones who are going around with the Never Bernie hashtag to show you that they'll never support him. And I mean, when I look at that hashtag, when I look at the arguments they make, this is my non-starter, I will never support this person, which, they have every right to do. Let's not get it twisted. But you can't do that and then still be pissed at people who chose not to vote for someone that they didn't like in the same manner that you don't like Sanders. And at least the ones who didn't like Clinton were ideological. You're literally, because as I said before, if they were so upset with Sanders over anything he's actually pushing or backing or supporting, they wouldn't vote for Harris. They wouldn't vote for Booker or any of these other people who have latched onto his positions. The only one I've seen them go after and say, I would support this person that isn't trying to appear to be a Bernie clone, or at least someone that has identical positions to him, is Klobuchar, who, I've said before is trashy and awful, but I defended when that report came out that she was throwing stuff at her campaign workers, because I don't think I should let my personal animosity towards a politician's particular views um, cloud my judgment when it comes to whether or not that person can effectively, manage their own staff. But allegations that aren't proven or don't have facts to go along with them. Emails, corroborating text, material that is in very much in the case of proving what is being said or alleged of that person. So that's another simple thing to get out there. What else is there to say? I'm just trying to send this link to this person. I want to make sure they're seeing this stuff. I'm a Rand Paul supporter, and yeah, there was no way I could vote for, even though I didn't vote for Trump either. Yeah, Marco, like I said before, this is not the I hate Trump show. I'm not a fan of either party. I've stated before that in the 2016 election, I lost a lot of respect for people like TYT, or hosts like, those on TYT, because they live in California, which is a blue state, which means, Hillary's going to win it. And then, want to tell you about, you got to vote for her, or else the other person is going to win. I couldn't do that. That whole thing of, I must now support the person who I think has the best chance of, the lesser of two evils thing. We've been over that before. And I've also said before, Marco, that Paul is one of only, I think, two Republican senators I actually like, along with Mike Lee, because even though I don't agree with them on domestic issues, they're really good on foreign policy. Lee was actually instrumental with Sanders, and I think it was Chris Murphy in the Yemen bill. They introduced it several times before it passed in the Senate back in December. And Rand has always spoken out against these offensive wars. I also applaud him for being one of the few Republican senators to stand up to the defense contractors and back Trump when he pulled out of Syria. So again, this is not, you have an R next to your name. Bleh. No, quite the opposite. And again, I've actually also given Republicans credit for having a primary that somebody who is an outsider can actually win. The Republican establishment went out of their way over and over and over again to deny Trump the nomination. First, they poured all their stuff in the Bush. He got smashed. Then they poured all their stuff in the Rubio. He got smashed. Poured all of it in the Cruz. He got smashed. No one remembers the strategic voting where they were going to vote for Cruz in Texas and Rubio in Florida, and then make it to where Trump didn't get enough delegates, even if he had a majority, to secure the nomination. So then at the convention, they could give it to somebody else. All of that went down. I was there. And I sat there with negate mouth, because I said to myself, even if I don't think this is some great candidate, whatever, if the voters want him, what the hell does the party have to do? Like, that almost looks like political suicide. Who would deny the person who gets the most votes, or a plurality of the delegates, that are allotted by the popular vote in these states, the nomination? But they were scared of him. So, that's another thing that's unfortunate. Just that we have, these people at the top who think that the actual voters are stupid enough to go with whatever they say. It's even more disturbing when I think about how, I think it was like 52% of Republicans support single payer, and then none of the Republican politicians back it. It's like that. Something's wrong with that. Like that. There's a genuine problem, a disconnect, when half the party is in favor of one issue and then none of its politicians are, actually supporting it. So that's another problem that, again, goes unaddressed. But let's go back to the domestic issue. So the only times you'll ever see Democrats actually resist Trump the way they want you to believe is on stuff like net neutrality, LGBT rights, which, and again, is another one of those things they've only recently shifted to. Because remember, the Defense of Marriage Act was able to get loads and loads of Democrats to support it. There, I always recognize the ones like Sanders. Well, he's not a Democrat, but whatever. That people who are liberal or left leaning that did support LGBT rights prior to it becoming politically convenient. When they realized, oh my God, we need this group to vote for us, and you can't have two anti rights parties. That's crazy. But those are the only two times you'll really get them to resist. You had a little bit with the tax bill, uh, but all of in general, whenever it's something that is part of the continued establishment circle jerk. And I've tried to explain this before. It's not a coincidence that after Bush, so the younger one, George W., Obama's immediate predecessor, signs the Patriot Act, which lets warrantless wiretapping, basically repeals the Fourth Amendment. Obama keeps the same thing going. Actually, arguably, is even worse because he signs the what was it, the NDAA 1021, where cops can throw you in jail without charging you. Um, and these really overreaching surveillance slash violation of human rights types programs and abuse and waste of people. That just kind of go on over and over. But it's not a coincidence that after one does it, the other one does it, even though from another party, and then the one after that keeps it going. I have never once seen Trump talk about the Patriot Act, getting rid of it, the need to give people back their privacy and security. None of it, because his voters don't care. Um, this is why Hannity was able to get away with saying, oh my God, all this surveillance by the Obama administration, and then after Obama leaves office, shh, pretends like it didn't even happen, because now it's inconvenient to keeping his viewers to criticize Trump ever, which is I don't like that, because as I started to stream off, I had a problem with Sanders. I brought it up. This is not about bootlicking for any of these people, but that's exactly what you will get from these TV networks, which is why I said before, if I had the option, I would rather see MSNBC go off the air than Fox News, because MSNBC, thanks to its support for Democrats, or establishment Democrats anyway, who have now embraced LGBT rights and kind of tried to appear to be the people who target what could be considered disparaged groups, now come off and trick people to think, oh yeah, man, these are the good guys, these are the good ones. Whereas a lot of people do see through Fox's bootlicking for Trump, other than when it's politically, than when it's convenient for their sponsors, like the defense contractors, which is why you actually had hosts who were seriously criticizing him for pulling out of Syria, since their donors didn't want that. But I'm saying that MSNBC usually is able to mask their own corruption a lot more than Fox. Oh, I didn't even see her comment. I didn't say she was. That was what was forwarded to me as the position that people were taking, that didn't really like her all that much, but just despised Trump all the more. Repealing, yeah. Jailed journalists 6 times with the Espionage Act, Obama. Like I said, this is not the Democrats or Republicans talking points, friendly buddy thing. I'm simply speaking about issues that both parties go out of their way to pretend they don't have in common. And because they have these things in common, you're going to realize this is why they don't want Sanders to get the nomination. All of these Republicans talking about the government takeover of healthcare are literally the flip side of the coin of Democrats like Sherrod Brown, who I used to have some basic respect for, who tell you in regards to single payer, it's not practical. We can't do it. Forget all those other countries that have do it. He had some goofy bill that was going to let firefighters and I think officers be the only ones who could sign on to Medicare before hitting, what was it, 65. So they're special citizens, and the rest of us just screw you, basically. But see, that's the kind of stuff that they do, that it's identical. It's not identical enough usually for people to figure out that it's two sides of the same coin, unless you mention it in tandem, because you might say, oh, this one side adamantly opposes it. The other side says, we'll eventually get there someday. And I said before, we have 30 million people who don't have health insurance. But they don't want to recognize this because it gets in the way of their own financial interest. It's the same thing with Pelosi and the Yemen bill, which is my main issue with her ever since she became House Speaker again. Here's a person who's in a position of power to end a war that has led to 85,000 children being starved to death or bombed. And I've mentioned this repeatedly, that had a Republican Senate pass this bill just 2 months ago. Same members are there for the most part. And she won't do anything about it. She just pretends it didn't even happen. And then all these idiots go around, Team Pelosi, yeah, we love Pelosi. She opposed this Trump. Yeah, she's so great. They really think that. They really think all you have to, like, in this modern era of political laziness, of having no ideology, of of style over substance, all that you have to do to be with the in crowd that you know follows this stuff is just say you don't like Trump. So the FBI, which was able to get away with its you know campaign against Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, is now heralded as a great organization because they supported, the former director Mueller is launching this investigation. Whereas someone like Sanders, who was a proponent of civil rights, while the last Democratic nominee was part of the Goldwater girls, if you can recall that group, is now being called someone who has a problem with minority voters, even as he polls as having an over 70% approval rating with I think both Hispanics and African Americans. I'm not sure. I think but I know it's higher. Most of them on both sides, both of those particular demographics like him. But again, in this hyper feminist era, logic, so reality, facts, statistics, polling is just smashed in favor of emotions. Oh, I feel like you made Hillary lose the election. Oh, I feel like you can't win an election despite you being the most popular politician. Or, for example, overperforming during a primary where people wrote you off and thought you had no chance of winning any state other than maybe your own. So this kind of mentality needs to stop, and it's the same one that's going to get Trump his second term if this Mueller thing doesn't pan out. Which I've said before, you can't subscribe to the theory that he's stupid and then also that he colluded with the Russians. I don't understand how people still are tripped up by these things. Oh yeah, I think Trump is so dumb. That's why he was smart enough to organize a master plan to steal the election. That must really show you how stupid American elections are. If someone you think has such a low intelligence level was able to do that with a country that's a known adversary of the U.S. Nonetheless, they just don't get it. Their voters, because they have their Bernie derangement syndrome, don't want to accept they are being had. People like Harris, Booker, they're careerists who are supporting his positions, by word as opposed to vote, so that they can get ahead in their own respective careers and piggyback off of things that they never talked about before. Have created a health that is mixed instead of choosing a free market. Yeah, well, Marco, like I said in another stream, Obamacare was a Republican idea that after he adopted, they suddenly all hated for some reason. And by the way, this lets you know how stupid the establishment is. It was either yesterday or the day before that, sometime this week, Booker went on, I believe it was NBC, one of those cable networks, and he's sitting here with these five panelists, and they start quizzing him about single payer or Medicare for all, as it's called, under Bernie's regime. And they ask him, how are you going to get Republican votes for it? That's one of the things they ask. How many, Marco, you remember how many Republican votes Obamacare was able to get, either of its bills? You remember? I can tell you, zero. So, like, do you see how people in both the corporate media, in both with Bernie derangement syndrome, they have this overwhelming tendency to rewrite history. When they're telling you Sanders can't win against Trump, suddenly they're pretending that he didn't overperform in a primary against a woman who a candidate, since people say it's sexist to mention what gender someone is, against a candidate who had been famous for decades, who had much more name recognition, just gets trailed or by him this entire time, to the surprise of loads and loads of commentators. Those 13 million votes that he got, including mine, suddenly didn't happen. because it's inconvenient to mention the reality of him being more successful than they'd care to admit. Like I was sitting here 2 days ago, and I watch the Senate sessions. Sometimes they have the members sit here and kind of speak about things. And the minority, this whole thing is rigged. I agree, Anthony. But the majority whip, so that's Stoon from South Dakota. He has a goofy last name, and that's irrelevant right now. But he gives a speech, and he's talking about some issues, and all of a sudden he starts harping on the Green New Deal. He starts talking about how single payer can't work, free college can't work. Just harping on all these progressive ideas. And I, as I'm sitting here, I have an epiphany. I say, wait a second. And remember, this is just 2 days ago. I might actually upload this clip on the channel just so you can see it. This is a person who's literally talking about two proposals, and then he also mentions the 70% marginal tax rate right after that. This is a person who's talking about two ideas that were forwarded by Sanders, and two ideas, so the Green New Deal and the 70% marginal tax rate, that were forwarded by a person, a candidate who was inspired by Sanders, who is a big time backer of Sanders. So his influence is felt more, like Republicans. I have a problem with the ones in office, the ones on TV, less, sometimes with the actual voters, but they still seem to me to be a lot more adept, since they don't have someone giving them money to act stupid. Sometimes their intelligence is stupid on purpose, or it's just them halfway there, like, oh, I support getting out of the wars, but not social issues. The Republican establishment, the people that are on TV and the politicians, just like in that speech I just told you about, they arguably recognize the legitimacy of Sanders and his ideology more than the Democrats do. Because we want to please everyone. Oh, yeah. And I've tried to explain this before. In that Tennessee Senate race with the former governor, and this is an example of how we try to please everyone. He was, if he had won the race, he would have been elected. He would have been sworn in this past, last month. Instead, it was the woman, Blackburn, Republican. But he confirmed he would have voted for Kavanaugh if he were in the Senate. And this is a person who knows that he's not going to be in there or, take office until after Kavanaugh's vote has already taken place. And he said that, this Democrat, purposefully to get Republican voters to support him. Instead of just acknowledging that there's always going to be a solid 30% of any state that's not going to support you, no matter what you do. No matter how right wing you try to act, no matter how left wing you try to act, they won't back you over their own party. He tries to buck dance for the other side, and it blows up in his face because it discourages his own voters from actually helping him. It was the same thing in Indiana with that guy that lost to what was his name, Donnelly, the one. Yeah, this is a person who supported Trump's border wall. A lot of Democrats don't like that. So what ended up happening was that Republicans voted for the Republican, and the Democrat, Donnelly, wasn't able to get the votes needed to win another term. But this is why when we hear about things being controversial and, oh man, Sanders might not be able to appeal, he might be too far left. Here's the thing: when they say that, they're talking about, because Sanders is an independent. This is what they like to bring up for why he shouldn't be able to run the primary, even though they didn't say that at all last time. So that's just what they're talking about. But what is crazy is that a majority of voters are independent. So theoretically, if he appeals to independents, since he's one of them, and we know he appeals to most Democrats, that should be realistically enough to either win the election or come very close to it. But instead, we hear this nonsense about trying to get the Republicans to back you when it's never going to happen. I think Trump has an over 90% approval rating with Republicans. Yeah, Hannick's fingers, yeah. Republican light just doesn't sell. And Sanders was completely aware of that. There's actually an interview that Schumer did on, I think, C-SPAN. And this was during that last presidential election, where he mentioned that he believed Hillary would pick up a couple of Republican voters for every Democrat they lost. That obviously didn't happen. But that's how, like, what I can respect about Republicans is that they never tried to do that. You never see any of the Republicans say, like when Trump won the primary, he didn't say, well, I want to appeal to Democrats, so maybe I won't ask for the border wall, maybe I won't talk about bombing the what out of Syria, or what was it, ISIS or whichever place he was talking about. He's kept to his form because he knew that he needed to get the Republicans out, the voters that backed him in the primary, and he wasn't going to do that by starting to slowly weave and bobble to being something he wasn't, which was a moderate, or a quote unquote moderate. I mean, I still kind of want to just vomit when I see people who, lump Pelosi and AOC in the same group. They are completely opposite of each other. The real problem is that not enough people pay attention to current events to know who Bernie Sanders even is. He had the supermajority. Why would he shift? Oh, you're referring to Obama, Hannix? Also, Ruben, I did the Patreon that I think you'd mentioned one to do before. Yeah, no, I'm just saying, Hannix, that you can look at what happened with Obama, where he also had a supermajority or a majority in both chambers when he started. So for the first 2 years of him being in office, and he had decided to just go and get this Republican healthcare bill, say, oh man, I'm gonna get some Republicans to vote for their thing. None of them do it. And then afterward, the whole narrative is he couldn't pass anything because the Republicans kept blocking him, which isn't true. He had 2 full years to do whatever he wanted with his supermajority in both chambers, and just didn't. Sold out right after the primary. Yeah, Hannix. We're aware at this point. But yeah, I think I've made the case for why this is problematic. Maybe so. Pick this cabinet. Oh yeah, was it Goldman Sachs? I know there was a bank that handed him a list of all the cabinet members they wanted. I know that, but I don't think it was Goldman Sachs. I could have sworn it was someone else. Maybe Citibank. I'm just saying I know it was a bank. I'll have to go look into that, or just clarify whichever source it was. We can do some new throwback Thursday type videos where every Thursday there's some flashback of, hey, remember that one time those senators sold us out for whatever? Hey, remember that one time that Republican did something that was good? J.P. Morgan / Chase. Yeah, they're another one that's up there in terms of their ridiculousness and way to being involved in politics. Bank of America. Hey, the more banks, the better for you. Ruben, you listen to all these banks are starting to make me nervous. I think I'm gonna get an email late tonight. It's gonna be signed by 5 or 6 different banks. We like what you're doing on YouTube, but we're gonna buy YouTube. We're gonna buy that website and tell them to shut you down because you're outing us too much. You have to tone down your rhetoric. 4 horsemen of banks. No, you know what, Ruben, you just did something really good. Now I have a name for what was it? Those Democratic leaders who are all to the right of Trump on war. So it was Schumer, Pelosi, Hoyer, and Durbin. Those are the 4 horsemen of war. I've never seen a single one of them not support a conflict or getting, whatever one, maybe not pushing for it to happen, but just being indifferent to it going on. Like how Pelosi puts out this statement about, we need to value the human rights of Venezuela as Trump is weighing, regime change over them. Like, dude, if he starts bombing there, who the hell do you think is going to get murdered? The people. And no one, and all the Democrats are, again, so caught up in their Trump derangement syndrome. They start smearing Ilhan Omar for, saying that we don't need to be over there, and people like Ro Khanna that, have a consistent record on being opposed to these interventions, just so they can look good for their, in front of their buddies. They can have that monolithic thought. And then, Republicans I respect to some extent on foreign policy, like Thomas Massie or Rand Paul or Mike Lee, they remain tight-lipped about the U.S. getting involved in Venezuela because they don't want to piss off Trump voters. So a lot of times it takes people who aren't in office saying these kinds of things so that people who are able to, you know, I guess continue to be cowards. It's sad, but the bootlicking for both parties is only going to stop if we get the two party system destroyed, pushed people more to the right, just like Democrats, which is why we have Trump. Oh yeah, he was completely instrumental in pushing people away from the Democrats and just kind of saying, all right, I either will vote for the Republican or just not at all. There's actually not a story, but what was I going to say? Oh yeah, when him and Trump were arguing back and forth about the economy and who started, I'm like, dude, 76% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, that which did not start with Trump. But why the hell, in having that statistic, would you want to take credit for the economy that has done nothing to remedy or otherwise solve the problem of people having wages that do not equate to appeasing the cost of living, paying for their housing and utilities like food, water, cars, all these different things that they have to split if they're in states not like California, they with a $7. You get my point. That it made no sense for the two of them to actually try to take credit for that. But again, because they have rabid supporters who do not think critically about these things. Oh yeah, I love Obama. Oh yeah, he did such a great job. Ooh. They don't want to think critically. So they'll get pissed at someone like Sanders, who, to his credit, or rather to his detriment, depending on which way you look at it, has toned down his rhetoric on Obama. Did not critique him as much as he probably should have, because he didn't want to piss off his voters. And that's the elephant in the room when we have all these people who just are night and day different from each other, but because they want to get the same voters as someone else, they try not to do anything that's controversial or might otherwise be seen as taking a stand, because they think there are ramifications for doing that. If you look at the whole scenario with what's going on with Venezuela, there are, as I've stated before, multiple Republicans in the House and the Senate who are opposed to these military conflicts, and they won't say anything about it because they want their voters to not get pissed off at them for going against Trump. This is the same kind of thing that happened when Obama was, involved in his conflict, where the Republicans were to the left of him on War and Peace. So it's all bad. And I've mentioned before, the Democrats, they have kind of a thing of, and this is what people don't seem to understand. They can have 30 or 40 years of Republicans just winning the White House over and over again, not through the popular vote, but through the Electoral College, like not picking up Florida, Pennsylvania, and these other states. And they'll be completely fine with it because they still keep their jobs. They still get to go out and go, yeah, I don't like this, whatever the Republican that's in office is. Oh my God, they're so horrible. Yeah. Because they know that they're never going to have to worry about losing their position. You think if Pelosi, I guarantee you that if Pelosi had a left-wing challenger in her primary that, actually, let's say she won it by 2%, that would freak her out. Same thing with Schumer or any of these other Democrats that are able to just stay around in office year after year while the president changes over and over. But they know as long as they get their position or keep that, it's a-okay. They can do the least and get praised the most. Like bullies with that I want to put that on a shirt, Marco. That is a very accurate description. But like I said, they're allowed to. They've hijacked various movements for the sake of appeasing, for just like being able to say, okay, you don't like Trump. You might not agree with us on 99% of what we want to do, but since you don't like Trump, you're on our side. That's what they do. And this is, like I said, it's part of the reason they don't like Sanders, because he goes out and actively tries to do something of his own. And that's problematic for them because they're just trying to ride this gravy train of being opposed to Trump on any and everything, to where they can then, have someone run against him in the presidential election who probably is the exact same as him or just trying to pretend to not be him, that gets smashed or destroyed because voters have their, Trump derangement syndrome, or they're not thinking critically. And then the cycle repeats itself with another Republican. water carriers for Republicans. Yeah. No, I actually had a person who was, they were talking about this was during the shutdown, and they said, why do we have, why are the Democrats not coming and negotiating or whatever? And I tried to explain to them during Obama's years. I'm not a fan of him, but he had record obstruction. So now the shoe was on the other foot. Now the Republican with the the partially Democratic Congress is going to get the same resolve. They despise it. They said that was a bad thing, wasn't helping the people. I said I agree, but let's not pretend that we need it. We need one party, the Republicans, that's really strong, doesn't tone down any of its rhetoric, always tries to appease its base, versus a side that spits in the face of progressives or liberals or people that are anti-war, or for any of the other stuff that Sanders likes, and also are backing just anything that's not Trump. They think they can win just with that. They don't have any actual ideology. But I was saying to them, you can't have that one side be that strong for 8 years under Obama, and then the other side's supposed to go, well, I guess we can do whatever Trump wants. Yeah. And like I said, the only thing they did in that entire, I didn't say this in the stream, but beforehand, the only thing that the Democrats were able to do the entire session of Congress, that whole 2 years, first 2 years of Trump, there were two things: net neutrality, which that's just a good thing that even some Republicans were like, yeah, why the hell are we getting rid of this? And also passing the Yemen bill, because every single Democrat in the Senate voted for that, to my shock. I knew one of them was going to piss me off, but surprisingly, no one did. But other than that, they were just crappy the entire time. And they don't particularly care about getting any better. There's actually a story that Jimmy Dore oftentimes relates where he mentions over here in California, we have super delegates at the state level, which I actually did not know about until 2 years ago when we elected, I think it was the new chairman of the party. And the way it works is that he and his wife went to the convention. They voted for the progressive, or the person who was more liberal. And that person overwhelmingly was able to get more votes than the establishment pick. And then they brought up the super delegates and were like, we're picking him. Thanks for playing. They really did that to him. But when they do things like that and they don't win elections or they get smashed, that's the only way for them to change. I have a Twitter colleague by the name of Jennifer who speaks with great recurrence about the Yemen conflict and her discomfort with the Democratic Party, because under a Democratic president, that conflict started. Democrats had, okay, to their credit, they didn't have control of Congress at that time, but seemingly barely any of them actually opposed staying over there at the time that it began. And she was talking about how if they lost all of these elections and people voiced why they were pissed, they'd have to change. Establishment Democrats were trying to get rid of her, and progressives and actually stopping the Republicans. Oh yeah, I apologize for reading it all quickly, but this is why they put that new rule in where supposedly you can't say anything that is against the party's platform. This is why there was that story floating around about a primary challenge to ALC. This is why Ilhan Omar was getting smeared as being anti-Semitic and anti-gay, because she said Graham was compromised, even though she said nothing about his sexuality. And it's actually more homophobic of the people who are saying that she is, because she said being homosexual would not mean someone's compromised. Like, just you get my point, that you can look at what's happened to these three people just in the last few months, and realize there is a serious problem that is enveloping both of these parties, and one so more than the other, the Democrats more than the Republicans, because people that don't like Trump subscribe to them blindly, and so they go along with anything they do or say. Pelosi could put out a tweet tomorrow that says we need to ban all drugs. We need to restart the drug war that incarcerated loads of minorities, and all the voters will start clapping and yay, because they don't have any real concern or care. It's just, as long as you're not Trump, you're good. Where the FBI and CIA are blowing up in terms of approval rating or support rather, which is still insane to me because I remember growing up and hearing about how awful the FBI was again during the civil rights movement to the Black Panther Party. You name it. I remember the CIA, getting criticized for what they did in Iran in 1953 to Mohammed Mossadegh, and we still, in this current era, now have people going, "Oh, they're so great. They're standing up for America." Yeah. I mean, I just sit there with an agape mouth. I don't even know what to say anymore. So, that same kind of mentality of just supporting whatever isn't one thing. It's happening to Sanders. He and Trump, even though I think they're polar opposites, they do have this thing of having actual supporters and these detractors who, they get focused on stuff like that's not policy related. Stuff like, oh, this person swears in Trump's case, or oh, this person I think contributed to someone losing an election by endorsing them and running in the primary, even that's the whole point of primaries. Let me now hate them irrationally. And because of that kind of blind distaste and disgust toward these people, they're going to allow a lot of crappy stuff to go on because it's a dangerous mindset that probably won't be realized for what it is until we get to the point where people just start losing elections and people they don't want to win start winning because of the factors I just mentioned. When you stop talking about policy and start focusing on whether someone made someone lose an election a couple of years ago or not, that's the exact thing that lets the other person win. But they don't want to recognize that. So the voters, to a smaller extent, have a part to play in this. The establishment of the DNC, obviously, and I think, like I said before, the Republicans are the most adept at realizing the tides are changing because they're including his proposals and AOC's proposals in their commentary now. They're talking about the more ideas that they have. I went on the Liberty Report, which is hosted by Ron Paul, who I happen to really like when it comes to foreign policy. He starts talking about the evils of socialism. I'm just like, man, go away. Buzz off. Go back to putting up offensive photos on Twitter. If you remember that, Ruben, that red, where it's all those different minority groups wearing the red shirt with the communist logo. Like, where would you even dig that up? I still can't believe that was him. That would even think that was a good idea. I just that photo was so weird. Where would you even come up with that? There's actually a video on Twitter, and I think if I go through my archive, I probably could find it where it's like AOC has her face photoshopped on some woman in a bikini, and it's Bernie looking out the window smiling, and then he's like in a room, and some woman whose face has been replaced with the communist logo comes in there. Like, I guess the idea is that he's cheating on communism with or socialism or something. It's just so weird, and it's like people actually took the time to make that. Oh my god. So, oh, Envoy, you would come all the way toward the tail end of the stream. I was interrupted earlier, and then we got to come back and sort of speak on this coup that's going on in the Democratic Party, where they're running all of these different candidates for the purpose of purposefully screwing up Sanders. Well, I'll probably do another one tomorrow, Envoy. But they're running all these people to screw him up, make sure he can't get the rest of the vote, so that when they get to there, it's kind of like what the Republicans wanted to do with Trump, where they wanted him to not get to get a certain number of delegates that would let him secure the nomination, so that they could then have a group of their bureaucrats at the convention pick the nominee. And that's exactly what's going to happen with Sanders. I guarantee you he could win all 50 states, which he won't. Just, I'm not saying to insult him, but I don't think anyone would win every single state. But he could win a majority of the vote and the states and then still lose by not having the needed number of delegates, either regular or super. And they can go and say, oh, well, now Harris is the nominee, even though she came in second or third place. And then just people who don't like him would be fine with that because they're not thinking critically about the threat to democracy. So divided first and her green in this story. But I think the smear by the media might be too strong to see Trump reelected. Yeah, but the media doesn't realize it's not popular. So when they did all those little hit piece stories on Trump, that only made him stronger. They kept giving him all that free coverage, just like with Fox News and AOC. They're not hurting her by doing that because the people that they're trying to appeal to and make things stupid, make her look stupid to, already were not supporting her to begin with. They're just having their position confirmed, but they're actively keeping her in the public realm. It's kind of like, let's pretend I did a video and it was called Fox News is uh, poopy poo poo pee pee water, and I gave you 6 or 7 different reasons why Fox is bad. I listed all the different people on it I think are horrible, their positions, a little juicy gossip about them, and said they look ugly. And so then Fox gets butthurt and makes they cover me for maybe 6 or 7 straight weeks. Every night, a new story. They do a new story about every video I do or interview I do of the video that I made about them. That would mean I would have a network, a public network that has, thousands of views every day, probably hundreds of thousands, but I don't know what the exact number is, giving me coverage for free with absurd regularity. They're covering AOC almost as much as they cover Trump. But they would be doing the same thing for me in that instance. And it would help me because it would be a daily reminder. Hey, guess who Justin is? No. Trump had a saying, it was any press is good press, envoy. Yeah, they made him infamous. That's why when the media, when you had sleepy eyes Chuck Todd sitting there talking about if Bernie can't run his campaign, he can't run the country. People already don't like those pricks. So anytime they criticize politicians that have a following, like how Trump has one, Sanders has one, it only intensifies the devotion of the supporters of that politician. They go and say, "Leave my guy alone. I'm going to back him or her." Same thing with Warren and Fox, where they talk about where you would almost think Warren was just a public figure that was only known for claiming to be Native American at one point. All they would do was talk about that same story over and over again, and people who didn't like it would go, "Ha ha, you're Native American," and then people who actually supported her would say, "Man, screw that. Let's talk about the issues," because the people who like her don't care about a story that's already been discussed repeatedly. What happened to Ruben? Where'd he go? What happened to Marco? Where'd he go? What happened to Hennick's fingers? Where'd he go? You guys just disappeared. Envoy just came here to take the take the mantle of responding in the comment section. Yeah, I was getting very concerned about Marco. He was lit up. He was telling me about all his positions. I was getting all excited. I was like, oh man, he's gonna say something else. Hey Ruben, whenever you swear, and this is like how stupid YouTube is. Whenever you swear in the on the chat, it has this automatic disable thing where it will pick up your comment and be like, "We think this comment is insensitive because he uses naughty words." So I had to, just letting you know, if when you see your comment get pushed back, that's not me. That's YouTube's little algorithm. I wish I could disable that, but unfortunately I cannot. Maybe a news story. Yeah, every time, Ruben. And the problem is if I don't see your comment when it's posted. So let's say I watch my own stream tomorrow. I'm like, oh, let me just review what I said and what I talked about. If I see that comment is hidden in the replay, it won't let me bring it back. Like, yeah, right now Andy's comment got hidden. To answer your question, I watched a little bit of him, not that much. I think the last thing I saw of his was his interview with Shapiro, and I really liked it because it's just the two people talking. No one's trying to argue back and forth. Which TYT actually criticized him for doing, letting people speak without, rebuking them as they believe journalists should. So, whatever. It is what it is. Let's see, just getting baked. I assume it's very hot over there. So I think we've pretty much said everything. I think that Trump has probably pissed off a lot of independents, but people who were ardent supporters of his remain with him. They have a devotion that if you combine that with people being enthusiastic about the Democrats as well as I don't blame you, Hannick's fingers, they piss me off too. Uh, but if you combine that with people not being enthused about the Democrat that is the nominee as a result of their rigged primary, it's going to spell doom as far as keeping him from getting another term. It just doesn't make sense to me where you would say the most popular person who overperformed in the primary wouldn't get record turnout. But we can keep making this case for another hour or so. Um, I was going to say, Hannick's, one of my favorite TYT videos is the one where Cenk predicts that Trump will resign in disgrace soon. It's like over a year old. It was from August 2017. I always go back and watch that and just think about all the time that passes, and year after year, you watching that same. It's like, has it happened yet? Is he done? Nope, still here. So that Mueller thing, if the highest I can see happening is maybe Kushner getting indicted, and that's probably it. I just don't see Trump having to resign over that. I did like the one scenario that Cenk brought up where he said if they found something on Ivanka because she was paying her workers like 50 cents a week or something really ridiculous and cancerous in terms of just the labor. Oh yeah, I would rather watch Jimmy over them too, Marco. He's way better. But he said that if they found stuff on her, then he would take the fall to, or at least resign to protect her from having to face further prosecution or criminal activity investigation. I can't stand TYT today. Yeah, Envoy, you can't say anything. You don't even like watching me anymore. That's why you disappeared for the entire stream. We know who you are now. You've been revealed. Envoy also unsub for me, Marco. He's unsubbing from everybody. He's committing a YouTube exodus. By going full Matto, Henix, do you mean that he's also participating in the new Red Scare? Of saying, oh my God, this person's working for Russia. They're part of Russia. They, if you think Trump is good on these issues, then you're a Russian. Yeah, Andy, I'm fully confident. I think he'll probably announce this month or next month. Far more objective, nuanced, conceivable. I appreciate that. I wish other people appreciate that, man. When I was doing that Patreon thing, I was hitting all the stops. I was like, hey, can you support me over here? Just like when the stream got interrupted earlier. If I had met the goal, which I don't expect to meet because there's too many people who are commentators, and there's it's just the pool is too big. It's kind of like the Democrats' field. I just kind of accepted, all right, well, I'm going to have maybe one or two people sign up for this thing. That's it. Screwed. Oh, man, into the toilet we go. Yeah, you're just literally showing up all the way at the end, Mr. Vampire. TYT has gotten better than me these past few months, but they were really bad during Trump's first year. I just think Cenk is good, and then all the people around him, other than Jimmy, usually range from it to. I said before, they have one panelist that every time she's on the show, I turn it off. That's how bad that person is. And I'll never forget the first time I saw them was election night for the presidential election, the 2016 one. And I just remember being so annoyed. Like, who is this person? They're just, I probably will when they do something that actually warrants, being named. Just like how everybody knows who Cenk is, everybody knows who Kasparian is, but any of the other ones, usually since they appear less often, tend to not be known as much. Mostly bastards instead of talk about policy. Yeah, they pissed me off with that. Toward him, hope you do more. Oh, you've been secretly watching this entire time. You've just been sitting in the background without saying anything, like Jiren. That's the you pulled a Clarence Thomas for the whole stream. I know no one will even get that reference where he, I think it was about 8, 7, 8, 9 years was like 2004, 2012. He just wouldn't say anything on the court. And I'll never forget that news story. It was like, Clarence Thomas finally breaks his silence, because I think it was the first time I ever heard of him. Since at that point in eighth grade, I wasn't a follower of politics to that extent, or to the extent that I am now. But what's your thoughts on that Starbucks? He seems pretty neutral in his stance, but he's a bit. Are you talking about Schultz? I can't stand him. He's another one of those people who I would identify as a neoliberal. They're really good on social issues, like being accepting of LGBT rights and all this other stuff. But any economic stuff, just forget about it. He's the kind of person who probably would have been the only Democrat if he was in the Senate to vote for the Trump tax cuts, the ones that give 83% of the wealth to the top 1%. Because he is in the top 1%, so of course he would like it. Oh yeah, it's a feminist world. You're not in it, or it's a feminist society and you ain't in it. History, golden quotes. I got confused. I was like, wait, what else did I say? I had to remind myself of my own rhetoric. Did he say he was against that tax change with Trump, though? I'm not sure. I haven't, admittedly, I like to admit my ignorance and admit when I don't know something. I haven't been paying as much attention to him as I probably should. I just know that he caused some people to get pissed because he was exploring an independent bid, since he was confident he couldn't win a primary. Which I think he would stand a good chance if Harris wasn't in there, because I kept trying to explain to people the only reason she got picked to be the anointed Democrat that they're going to put up against Bernie is because of her gender and ethnicity. They can call you sexist and racist for not supporting her. And it's just like with when you oppose the Israeli government, they call you anti-Semitic. We're going to get to a point where these words don't mean anything anymore. That's why when they called Trump that over and over again, they had already called so many people that it didn't matter at that point. What if Bloomberg ran too? I really don't believe he would make a difference. I think this isn't like Ross Perot, where there's actually an issue that's really serious that they're talking about and connecting to people with. I think he'd get annihilated. He might take some votes from Trump. I don't see him taking votes from certain Democrats. All that happened, everything you've told makes me think we ought to be. Well, the problem with that, Mr. Vampire, is that there are a lot of people who throw that word around, socialist, and then they don't even. It's kind of like that's why we said the new Red Scare. They don't actually have a definition for it, and they would rather say that than talk about single payer, free college, Green New Deal, and the wars. Policy substance. Then they can just smear you by saying that person's a Bolshevik or a socialist. So, that's it. So I'm saying that word, I really do hate its continued usage, because it takes away from having an actual conversation about the issues, which is what this stuff should be about. I mentioned before there's a key issue that I actively oppose Sanders on, but I have problems with all these politicians. I'm going to try and stop Sanders from winning. I could see that, Ruben, but I still think that like behind the scenes, there's some kind of talking going on. Because remember, O'Rourke was getting talked about as as the new Sanders. Remember that little ugly picture where they took Sanders's body and stuck O'Rourke's face on it, if you recall. I think it was the New York Times did that. And ever since Harris got in, you don't hear anything about him, to where he was like, "Yeah, I still exist. I'm gonna announce by the end of the month." That's a good point, though, but I think he will be out of touch. Yeah, that's why I said Andy. People will stick to Sanders more. I haven't seen that picture yet. Oh, man, maybe if I could post it somewhere. Let me see. It was weird. They really think they're pulling the okie doke on us. So you guys aren't tricking me. They're very lucky that all the voters don't think the way I do. If that was the case, none of these people would ever be elected again. Man, that would be their last term. They would be savoring their days. It's my last. Got 2 more months. Gotta make this count. Gotta get that lobbyist job. That's what they think of when they see Sanders. They're like, "Oh man, I can't take money from the from Big Pharma anymore because he put single payer in, and we can't, actively make sure that no one can get to the top via education due to their student loan debt. Oh hell, what are we gonna do? You can show me that picture on Twitter. I finally fixed my account. Are you following me? Because if I have it muted to where I don't see anything from people I'm not following. So give me your handle, and then I'll be able to go and send you probably a PM with it in there. Just to make sure. You see, did I miss anyone's comment? These words don't mean anything nowadays. Yeah, Envoy. It's so ridiculous. Yeah, Envoy. I can't stand TYT today. Yeah, Envoy. What do you plan on speaking on tomorrow, Justin? I don't know, Envoy. I unsubscribed a long time ago. It just got ridiculous. I know, Envoy. That was your we call it your highest moment of significance during the stream. We gave you your whole minute of having your name shouted out repeatedly. That's why the Democrats want uneducated people to vote for them. Twitter and Discord. Okay, here it is. All right, sorry, I got confused, Ruben. I was trying to mess with. I was trolling Envoy. Remember how they say keyboard warrior? Like if people, when they type something, it's to mess with you. I was actually to his, with in front of him, going, "Yeah, I'm gonna say your name over and over again and let people know who you are." So let me go over to Twitter, make sure that I'm following you, or that I do. I don't forget. I don't develop Alzheimer's in the next 5 seconds. Every now and again, let me read Andy's comment. Every now and then I see TYT, like today I seen their little thing talking Bezos and his, oh yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just that's why with me, I usually only like to talk about one news story per day. And I generally just kind of weigh which ones, because the Trump stuff gets boring. Like, oh man, Stormy got arrested. Oh, Stormy is going to prosecute. Oh, Avenatti's going to do this. Putin said, man, out of here. I did record a video for the INF treaty, but I was like, you know what? What's the chances of that getting more than maybe 10 views? Oh yeah, that's right. And I just said, I'm not even going to bother editing it or putting it up. I'll just leave that in the what do you call it? The lost video archive. I was serious. I literally recorded something last week and I was editing it, or rather put it together. And I said, you know what? I was going to watch this. It's not tabloidy enough. I have to make a video about women I don't even talk to anymore every 2 weeks to get people to come back. Let me see. All right, Ruben, I just gave you a follow. I'm your 21st follower, which is also incidentally my age. What a coinky dink. I'm the one that has the picture of the guy eating the dollars. Okay, TYT making people more to the right every day. Yeah, because they keep pissing people off by talking about things that don't matter. Just like I remember I was watching, and this is, what's his name? Idarola. He did a stream about, not a stream, a video as part of the, I forget what it's called. It's the report. It's something the report, or the something report. And it was about Cruz's new beard. I'm like, are you for? You're really obsessed about how this man looks. This person who you guys literally had a video of several years ago saying was ugly. So if he's ugly, why are you talking about how he looks? Talk about what he does. But that was the whole point of you not liking this person. They're blindly biased. That's their problem. I think the people are saying just how skewed the media is on the liberal side. I still don't think the media is on the liberal side. I just think it's the establishment, because Pelosi is not a liberal. Neither is Hoyer or any of these other pricks that I see the media constantly liking. If you watched MSNBC's interview with Tulsi, where it was, I think it was her and like a whole on the Joe show, the one with Scarborough, and they were asking her about Syria. They were going after her from the right. What do you mean they're not our enemy? What do you mean? Da, 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 da. anytime you come on there to start backing a war, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, they keep quiet. They say, hey, it's A-okay. And again, if you watch CNN, they've had a bunch of crappy little stupid panelists crapping on him, on Bernie, in reference to him. There was some story where there was a woman who was on, I think it was MSNBC, and she said that Bernie should go away, and then the people went on her Twitter and found she had like racist tweets or whatever, and then she, oh, I've grown so much since I wrote those 2 years ago. In the last 600 days, I've had this metamorphosis. But these are the kind of people they're pulling up to mess with and try to insult him. And I watch this stuff and I always ask myself, does any of this ever change my mind? And if it doesn't, I say, well, if for their sake, they better hope that regular people don't think the way I do, or they're in for a rude awakening. Neoliberal, neoconservative. Yeah, Gabbard called out both of those. Doesn't help when you take people off certain social media platforms. Just what they did to Alex Jones. But again, it's going to come back to bite these people when it happens to someone that's liberal or left leaning. It just hasn't happened yet. You just have to piss them off eventually. That's why I said that's why I was so adamant about the Patreon thing, because I said, I wanted to get revenue off of that. But if YouTube is going to keep coming around and going, it's nice that you just got 16 cents today, let's cut off 50%. I'm going to never get anywhere with this. But the thing is, that's why people are getting, I was going to read Mark's comment, but he erased it. Is such a blessing and a curse. It's just another monopoly that you have to put up with the rules and regulations of, because it doesn't have a competitor. Another site with a dark system of people that no one knows all that much, but I think they hate Trump more. But my problem, Andy, is that every time I watch clips of these hosts, the only time I ever see somewhere like, let's say, MSNBC or CNN go after him is for, oh, that was his second account, my middle name. Oh, I had no idea. I'm going to call you AME from now on. But like I was saying, Andy, I always see them usually go after his rhetoric. I can't believe Trump would call that journalist whatever, or would make fun of the one that had the disabled thing, or would say that Romney walks like the penguin on stage, or anything of that nature. It's never policy substance. They go after Sanders hard. You remember that little stupid Jake Tapper clip where he was talking about how what was it, Medicare for all would increase the debt, and it was dumb because he pretended as if you implement the single payer system, we would still keep Obamacare, even though the whole point of getting single payer is to get rid of all the private sector ones, which means all of them would go away. But yeah, the thing is they never take down the left-leaning people. Not saying I'm a right-wing nutto, but there is a clear bias, especially on Twitter. Yeah, look what they did to Laura Loomer. She was not even just Twitter. They went after her on, I think it was Uber, also messed with her. So Jesus Christ. Oh my God, it doesn't get any better for these people. Let's see, I never seen that. What? Oh, I never seen that with Jake Dapper said, yeah, he did a clip where he basically crapped all over single payer, and pretended like we would have all these different systems running at the same time. Cultural Marxist. Yeah, that's the thing about having a system that does not have clearly stated rules. That means the people who control things will be able to kick you off whenever they want. Somebody that runs YouTube could say, I don't like that jacket he's wearing. And then I would just be gone in 5 seconds. So I'm texting too fast. Yeah. Let me see if I read anything else. I'm trying to make sure I get everybody's comment. Mr. Vampire says he remembers kind of. He's halfway there. He 50% remembers. Oh, thank you, Envoy. You're saying I made a great point in this joint? And and that it intrigued you like an iguana. This is why we need to legalize marijuana. You just have to hold your hands up because you can't change the game. It's going to stay the same. Even though Sanders may be a sensation, he'll get screwed by the DNC's delegation. Wow, Envoy, I didn't know you were such a great rapper. All right, see you later, Ruben. I'm trying to segue to my ending as well. What's your thoughts on the Green Deal? I'm all for it. You know, I did a video about there's no time for climate change deniers. We really have people who think you can just keep playing around with this stuff, including the Speaker of the House, which he called a green dream. How do you like? That's the simplest name in the world. Green New Deal. What is hard about remembering that? It's literally New Deal with green in front of it. And then this is the same idiot referring to Pelosi who had a program called Better Deal. I think it was the year before last. So why would that name be any harder? Whatever. If you can maybe give me some more info to help me remember being serious. Yeah, sure. I will definitely give you the information. Let's see. I didn't know Envoy was such a great rapper. We need to get him signed to a record label. We need to have Kendrick Lamar and the other and J. Cole and the rest of them retire. Like we can't keep up anymore. Oh, this is insane. I really do sit here some days and watch these people on Twitter and just the way that they talk about that's your 3 Pac. I can't wait for there to be conspiracy theories about you every day for no reason. But I was saying that I was watching these people congregate on places like Twitter and these other websites, and it does still, even after months of seeing it, blow my mind that they're completely okay with having a corrupt process of nominating a presidential candidate just because they don't like the guy that they're trying to do it to. Like that blows my mind. There's a solid 10 or 20% that will not only, whatever, you vote against whoever you don't like, I get that. But they will say, oh, our primary's rigged. So what? I expect the DNC officials to partake in that. What I don't expect is the voters to go, oh, yes, we like our dark system of no democracy, while we claim that we so love democracy that the person who got the majority of the votes in the last presidential election should have won. You see how like they don't even know their own narratives? Just like I remember I had one person I was following that said you were sexist if you wanted Pelosi, to not be speaker anymore. But then they didn't call the Democrats sexist when they pick Jeff Reese over Barbara Lee for caucus chair. They were just all silent. Our moral compass is running on empty. We bend our stuff whenever we want to. That's why when I was watching Trump's national prayer breakfast speech, and he's talking about the love of babies and everyone's life and all that crap, I'm just thinking about all the babies that died in Yemen because of him and Obama and their love of defense contractors and bootlicking for Saudi Arabia and getting their dollars as well. Like that was the first thing that came to mind. I mean, people just don't care unless it affects them. Their tax dollars can be wasted killing a bunch of people they don't even know, and they'll just say whatever. You know what would be a really interesting experiment? If from this point forward, whenever I do a video, I just have a picture of like a random starved Yemen baby on the camera. And then people would think that there's something wrong with me. Like, what kind of sick freak gets off on this? Not what kind of sick freak does this to people. No, what kind of sick freak would keep posting these photos over and over and over again? I remember what you told me about, Mr. Vampire. It is a very disturbing thing that they just let happen. And like I said, war is one of the most, even though it kills loads and loads of people, it's one of the most bipartisan things that exist in America. You have Democrats that will support it, and Republicans that'll support it. And they'll even sometimes trick you by saying, "Oh, this person," blah, 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 blah. But then when they get in office or when their buddy continues the same policy, shh, be very, very quiet. I mean, I sat here one day and I looked at Cruz, his positions. I remember he was adamantly opposed to everything Obama did. 7 wars, right? Bombing 7 countries. First president ever that's at war his entire tenure. So then Trump, looks to continue all these different wars, and you would expect Cruz to now say, "Hey, look, I'm consistent. I was against these wars when this other person was doing it. We have to stop these now." Instead, it's no, 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 Spaghetti-O. I'm fine with these conflicts because we have to show how strong we are. The only one of those Republicans I've seen be consistent, no matter who it was Rand Paul in the Senate. But again, since he's ambitious, there's only so much he will do. And again, that's not. I know Marco doesn't want to hear that. That's not a shot at him. That's just me saying, based on the nature of politics, you can't do certain things. Like, for example, if I were to run for the House, I'd be instantly reprimanded for calling Pelosi the fossilized, uh, antiquated hag that she is, because they how dare you? Not how dare she for supporting all these wars that got thousands of people killed and wasted trillions of dollars. But whatever. Words matter more than actions in the modern feminist era. Let's see. That's why, if you saw the video I did about the Stacey Abrams thing, it was okay for Bernie to give a State of the Union response when it was a male as the Democrat who gave a response before him, but now it's a woman. You're evil. You're sexist. So even if we do care, we just get too agitated. You're talking about war. Don't even talk about the American troops and what happens to them once they come back. Yeah, the same douchebags who sit here and tell you how much they love America, and that's why they want to keep all the illegal immigrants from killing us and taking our jobs and blah, 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 are the same ones who let 27% of the homeless be veterans who come back from the same conflicts that they support. They support the conflict and the people going over there to get murdered on their behalf, but not the people who come back. This oligarchy crap gotta go. Yeah, I agree, Andy. It is a continuous cycle of evil. If a woman called me to this day and age, I'd probably smile. Granted, doesn't insult me, losing my job, so I would just smile it off because it's so meaningless. Yeah, it's just another word that is going to keep getting thrown around where it doesn't mean anything. Just like we're going to get to a point where being called anti-Semitic doesn't mean anything, because literally anti-Semitic in America now, thanks to its close relationship with Israel, is just anyone who says, yeah, the Israeli government shouldn't have done that. They don't care. They will smear you. That's why Ilhan Omar is getting, verbally crucified by all of these Israel, these AIPAC backers. Which, by the way, Harris and Booker are way more for Israel than either Sanders or Feinstein, who are both Jewish. They actually both signed a letter in support of BDS having the right to not be interfered or messed with by the government. So they both said, we're opposed to this, but we shouldn't intervene with this because we personally disagree. That's a respectable position, in my opinion, even if I don't agree with it. Just like this wall thing, right? I would support the wall getting built, even though I think it's a waste of money, if we could get something out of it. And also because I know if it's up there, no one would ever ask for it again. So for example, I'll give you $5 billion for the wall in exchange for, I don't know, $3 billion in free college for whatever part of the country or whatever, let them do it. I'd make that trade. Or, I probably would ask for the same amount both ways. But you get my point, that there are just certain, like that whole shutdown struggle, we got nothing out of it, progressives, liberals, whatever. And we're actually about to, let's see, today is we're in the last hour and a half of the 9th. We're going to get another one by the end of next week if they don't come up with this little stupid spending bill. That's why I didn't get why they were celebrating. Yay, we ended the longest shutdown ever. Yeah, but it's about to start up again in the next couple of days. Spartacus is running to that bloody shill. Oh yeah, well, like I said, Andy, I'm gonna do something on him and Harris. Do a whole separate series of videos just talking about how crappy their records are. They talk about low birth rate. How do you think this gets tackled and solved? Women just need to stop being so picky about the men that they, that approach them and give them the time of day. Like I said, I met dozens, not tens, dozens of women I thought were decent, fine, would be good partners, and they just, because the parent thing wasn't something they planned out or wanted to specially, said screw it. So, it is what it is. Plenty of people who want to be fathers that can't do it because the people in control of that are not interested in doing it. It's a sad cycle. But hey, adoption is still there, even if it's not all the way what you want. It's the half measure to I compare it to like the healthcare debate. Okay, well, we can't get single payer, but we can at least lower the age for Medicaid. It's like, oh, it's a half measure. Even though I'm not trying to dehumanize adopted children, but I'm just saying. Yeah, especially when you get loans to pay off, or when you have loans to pay off. Well, yeah. Well, again, people just don't care about things that don't pertain directly to them. What do I have to gain from being somebody's parent? This is a very dark topic. What is the birth rate lowering and the only way to solve it, and the fact that people who more often than not get to become fathers in this modern era of loving what is the opposite of what is right, or liking being attracted to danger and things that are crappy. Yeah, that is kind of disturbing. What do you think of the NY? I haven't done enough research on it. I heard about it a little bit in that speech, but I want to make sure I know all about it. Yeah, you work with me and I'll work with you on universal healthcare. Yeah, that's my point. That I would, even if I don't personally like that policy, I know that if it is done and it doesn't work, which I don't think it will, whatever, I would see it be made in its entirety. That thing would scale all the way to Mars, just if it meant getting either single payer or free college or something that I actually want. And Pelosi wouldn't do that. Well, that's what happens when you have a site that's so focused on me, 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 me. Oh yeah, Andy, we could do a whole stream on that. the narcissism that is involved. That's why Pelosi is speaker. Here's a person again with a 29% approval rating, and then goes, "Oh, but she's such an effective legislator as her party lost the most seats since World War II while she was speaker." You can't make this up, I swear. Same thing with the Democrats. Bernie can't win an election. He's unelectable. I mean, he only received 13 million votes in the primary while running with low name recognition in comparison to the other person who we had known for decades. He only overperformed repeatedly, like in Michigan, where they the polls all the way up to the last day showed him behind and he still won. Yeah, I've never been more proud to be part of a group, Marcy, than that 13 million. I would be, honestly, you can talk about this for like an hour and a half. I'm gonna make a note to remind you of this in the future. Oh, look, just ask Ed Schultz. MSNBC and the Clinton campaign were connected at the hip. What do you want a video that is an hour and a half about, Envoy, just to clarify? An election rigged against him. Oh yeah. We did this before. I have the Bernie 2020 versus another rigged primary where I went over and played the clip of Schultz talking about getting fired for being someone that was in favor of him and going against his bosses and whatnot. So it's a realistic thing that happened. That again, his detractors will pretend didn't, because it's convenient to their narrative to act as if the voters just didn't want him. With this whole society and the me ads, I think it comes down to this lust for cat. I was watching a video earlier today about this. I'll probably read more into it, but between tonight and tomorrow, and then maybe that could be one of the topics I discuss or think about doing. Okay, let's see here. Are you guys have anything else to say? I'm getting ready to close out. I think we've explained why the Democrats would rather have, crappy, quote unquote crappy Trump as the president than Sanders, who they claim to be more in favor of. There's a whole video of Schumer talking about how he and Sanders are very much similar in their ideology. But again, I think they would, as I've stated before, explained with reasonings, they'd rather have Trump get another term. Hell, they'd probably rather nominate what was that one Republican, Jeff Flake, or Bob Corker, or any of the Republicans that became known for taking a stand against Trump while voting with the majority of the time. I'm gonna disappear like Jimmy Hoffa and reappear like Ross Perot, who withdrew from the night. What was it, the '92 presidential election, and then came back later. Then there was Gary, which is nonsense. Yo, what Beto though? What's my opinion on Beto? Andy, or you asked me about my opinion on O'Rourke. I think he's someone that would have been really good as a senator from Texas that is now being overstated as a potential presidential candidate. And like I said, the reason you forgot about him, Andy, is because the media talked about him for like 2 months. Then they got all obsessed with Harris, and then he had to come out and go, "I'm going to make my decision at the end of the month." I don't think he's going to run just because I haven't seen him say much of anything at all about running. It's just been the media going, "Could O'Rourke do this? He's in the top 3 candidates." Yeah. HBO series coming soon. Oh yeah, they're gonna do like a whole romanticized sitcom about his life. Try to like make him out to be the second Christ or whatever. Yeah, that's what I'll say. You remember that video that documentary did about Romney was called Mitt or something like that after the election? They try to make him look so nice and humble and such wonderful, great people while they advocate for bombing babies overseas and tell you that they're very concerned with Americans while they support ignoring having millions of them have no health insurance. So they don't care. But thank you for watching. I would appreciate donations to. Yeah, it's called Andy. It's called Mid. It came out in the year after the election, or the months after the election, the 2012 election. So I would appreciate people signing up on Patreon. I don't think you will because there's just I know how people are with money. If bombing kids can't stop it, then your goose is finally cooked. Like Obama people said, he walk on walk and gets us to love one another. Yeah, his walk on walk was bombing 7 countries and leaving 30 million people without health insurance and 76% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. I swear, like the Obama Trump thing reminds me of Coolidge and Hoover so much. And I just hate that people don't know who those two are to the extent that they should, where like people will debate which one of them started the Great Depression. Like they both contributed to it. Just like what's happening now, we're going to have another recession. And it's going to be both the faults of Obama and Trump. And it's probably going to happen next year or this year. I think definitely while Trump's still in office, and then he'll be looked at just like George W. But we need to get people like Sanders or Gabbard, who individuals actually like, and I just don't see that happening at this point. There's too few people who are focused on issues. We've gotten so caught up in being obsessed with, oh, I don't like Trump, so I'm good. That doesn't cut it for me anyway. It's not the time for small change. So thank you.